Hi, I'm Josh from Crunch Media, and welcome to Talent Talks, the podcast where we hero professionals within the talent attraction and recruitment marketing space. And a big welcome to Joseph Smith, experienced talent and resourcing manager at Natural Resource Wales. Joseph, thanks so much for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you for the invitation. It's an absolute delight to be here.
Well, it's been a while in the making. I know we met at RecFest a couple of months ago, and we've been sort of talking on and off the last 4 or 5 months. So, Jenny, thank you for carving out some time out of your very busy calendar and schedule to doing this. It's really interesting to talk to you, and really looking forward to hearing about your story and kind of what you got to say.
Well, I hope I have something interesting to say anyway, but no, couldn't think of anything better to spend the a Friday afternoon recording this episode.
Oh, hopefully so. It's a nice way to see out an autumnal Friday. Autumnal Friday. I've got to apologise. My tongue is getting twisted everywhere we go. So to kick us off, Joe, can you talk about us how you got here? It's kind of, for those who aren't listening, Joe and I actually kind of share a little bit of background when we went to university together. Although unknowingly, I don't think we actually crossed paths kind of over the 3.5 years. But we started same year, graduated the same year, so we're both Aberystwyth University alumni. So big shout out to West Wales over there.
Absolutely. And while Aberystwyth is a relatively small town compared to other towns in the UK, I'm always surprised by the people who I've met who have got a connection to Aberystwyth or who have studied in Aberystwyth. But it's absolute madness that we were at university at the same time as each other, but potentially our paths may have crossed or not.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm sure. I'm
who
sure there's a.
knows?
I'm sure there's a pub somewhere we must have been in at the same time as each other. It does make me laugh.
Definitely.
You're absolutely right. No matter where you go, even Wreckfest, but obviously talking to you and sharing that background. But then about an hour later, after I'd spoken to you, someone else walked past that I played rugby with. So it's a smaller world there at Abbey Uni alumni circle.
Yeah.
So, but Joe, tell us how you got here. How have you gone from doing, I think, what was it languages at university to
That's
heading
correct. Yes.
heading up talent and resourcing?
Yeah, I'm still trying to work that out myself, but I'll try and explain it here on this in this episode. So as you said, I graduated with a degree in French and German from Aberystwyth University, and I always thought I would be in a role that would require my use of languages on a daily basis. However, shortly after graduating, I was very lucky to be employed on one of the university's newly developed graduate scheme programs. And the actual role that I was appointed into was in the international office, which was a relatively new office or department established within the university. And its purpose was to attract international students from all parts of the world to Aberystwyth University. My role in specifically was to support the Erasmus and the Year Abroad exchange programs that the university was offering at the time. So very much administrative, but there was a marketing stance to the role as well, which required me to start developing and to oversee the development of, literature, social media to promote mainly the benefits and the main reasons why students should be considering either the Erasmus scheme, mainly in Europe, or one of our international year abroad programs. And that's really where my career sort of started in the marketing arena. So shortly after joining the international team, I was very lucky to be considered for an interview within the student recruitment department within the wider marketing department of the university. That role was mainly travelling based, so it saw me being in one of the university branded vehicles, travelling around the country, promoting and talking about the universities and the main benefits of going to higher education within schools, colleges, and other further education providers within the regions of North Wales, Yorkshire, Liverpool, Merseyside, and also Northern Ireland attached to that. So that little sort of circular north region.
Were those
And I
yellow and purple cars? Am I thinking of them right? I'm sure you used to see them going around campus. Because they had Abbey Uni branded all the way across
That's
one side.
correct. I'm a stickler for sticking to things that I like. So the car that I used on a daily basis was the red Renault Megane Estate. And I practically lived up that car for probably a good 2 years in that role, and it served me well too. Um, so yeah, was in student recruitment and absolutely loved that interaction with, A-level students and college leavers who were undecided as to what pathway they wanted to pursue, or those who had a number of subjects that they were interested in but didn't quite know which subject they wanted to choose to study at university, and also liaising with their and speaking with their parents and guardians and their respective teachers and college advisors. And that's really where my interest around brand was ignited, and the importance and relevance of brand management within the higher education context. So we worked within that role. We worked daily with our colleagues in marketing roles in the central office, as well as our colleagues in the graphic design team. And we took it upon ourselves to be communicating back to the organisation what other higher education institutions were doing, and what we thought were fantastic examples of brand pieces that attracted people to stands at college events, or UCAS fairs. If anyone remembers going to a UCAS fair and coming home with a bag full of prospectuses and whatever else were freebies at that particular time. So fast forward 2 years into that role, an opportunity arose within the department to focus on digital content development. We were in the process as a university moving from our old design website, which, if you remember when we were students, Josh, it was yellow and purple was the predominant colours, to more of a mobile friendly platform that had adopted a different colour scheme but still had the emphasis on the Ava yellow, which is absolutely famous around the world. So again, very fortunate to have been considered and appointed into that role and worked alongside many colleagues in the marketing department, but also across the university on developing content to attract students to the university through our core digital platform. And it was from there then where I broadened my skill sets further in brand management, graphic design, and supported my colleagues at the time in the human resources department with key talent attraction pieces. In particular, attracting specialist academics to the university, and also helping with any sort of senior leadership team recruitment at the time, ensuring that we had, a candidate pack that was detailed on brand and reflected our values as an organisation. And that's really where I discovered an untapped desire really to maybe move more into the talent acquisition world, and a realization of the synergies between student recruitment marketing and talent attraction marketing. And it has brought me here to Natural Resources Wales, where I've been very lucky to be their talent and resourcing manager since January 2023.
Oh, it's fascinating. I think what's really interesting to hear is you talk to a lot of recruiters, and a lot of talent attraction recruiters often have quite a shared background, which is normally sales. Everyone seems to have had some form of relationship with sales at some point in their lives, but haven't always made that connection with the marketing. Whereas for you, kind of marketing has really been prominent within that career journey, which has then enabled kind of all those different steps that you've taken. So that journey's taken you here to Natural Resource Wales. So tell us about the business. What do you guys do?
So in Natural Resources Wales, we are the main environmental protection body for Wales. So we are the largest Welsh government sponsored body, and our core focus is on tackling the climate, nature and pollution emergencies in Wales. So we have three really distinct missions as an organisation. Our first mission is nature is in recovery, and we are focused on collective action towards achieving that. We also prioritise resilience to climate change, and we will aim to do that through minimising pollution through Wales. And the organisation is working on some really exciting and innovative projects to achieve that, to give you one example, the teams that I'm working very closely with are overseeing one of the largest peatland development sites in Wales. And not that I want to get too technical because that's not my area of expertise, but from what I've been told, peatlands or peatland bog generally is a fantastic carbon absorber. So it captures carbon from the environment. So if we can take that particular model and potentially look at how we can mirror it in different areas of Wales, I'm sure that's going to have such a positive impact on minimising pollution and making the environment of Wales much better for future generations. In addition to that, then we manage regulation, we work with industry, and we also provide key critical life service, for example, like our flood warning forecasting service, which is a lifeline to various parts of Wales that are more susceptible to flooding.
It sounds fascinating. And tell us about your role in the business, because I think from us talking before, the role within the business was relatively new when you came into it. It wasn't something that was previously kind of established for Natural Resource Wales, and it's now become almost a strategic part of the business.
That's correct, yes. So, as I mentioned earlier, I joined NRW in 2023, and this is a brand new role for the organisation. Traditionally, recruitment, or the team that I'm very lucky to be managing, sat alongside team members in payroll and HR transactional services. And at the time that I joined, the organisation had gone through an organisation-wide change from a few years previous, and they were really struggling as an organisation to fill some key technical roles. And as a result, the organisation had discovered a need for a specific expert when it came to not just recruitment, but from a talent acquisition perspective. And I think this was a pivotal moment for the organisation, realizing that the value that a recruitment, resourcing, and talent acquisition team can offer an organisation in terms of managing the cost of having vacant positions and providing specific expertise on some challenging resourcing pieces.
So, Joe, tell me how your role's evolved over the last couple of years. How has it changed from when you first walked through the door to where you are today?
I'd say there's been some significant changes since I first joined NRW. I would say the first day to the first 4 months, it was quite reactive in terms of the environment. I stepped into an organisation where we were carrying a significant number of vacancies, and there were a number of teams that were experiencing challenges when it came to resourcing and finding the right candidate with the skill set. Fast forward to today, I would say we're in a very different position as an organisation. I think we've understood what changes we needed to introduce to our recruitment procedure to mitigate from the broader resourcing challenges. I think we've done a lot of soul searching with our managers within the organisation to really identify what exactly is their role in the process. To give you some insight, when I joined, the organisation had what is referred to as a self-service approach when it came to recruitment. So managers would have access to information and they would work from that information to manage the recruitment process independently. So what we were finding is that there was a significant divide between managers who had the capacity and the time to facilitate a recruitment process, and then managers who were really struggling when it came to balancing the day-to-day job as well as the demanding tasks around recruitment and resourcing. In addition to that, then I think the pandemic changed the way we work and also the shape and size of the market. In many sort of areas within the organisation, ICT being one example, regulation being another example. It was evident that a number of people were moving from the public sector into the private sector, and even to this day, public sector is still is still struggling to compete against the private sector, and seeing this as a growing area that needs addressing generally.
It's, I think, and that's something that you're really passionate about, isn't it? Is being able to make the public sector more, more available to audiences in general, specifically to diverse audiences. But that, I think that is a key challenge that, I've seen before, where people are looking to move into those public sector roles, and you're having to. I think, am I right in saying you have to start on the lowest grade boundary when you enter those? I think I've seen that in civil service roles before, where you're
Yes,
given
correct.
you're given a band, and now coming from the private sector, you might be kind of halfway up that band. You might be at the top, and you saying, "Well, that job's right for me." But if you want to enter that world, you're going to have to start right at the bottom. And from a cost of living perspective, from a way of working perspective, that's not always feasible for what must be quite a large portion of that audience.
You're absolutely correct, Josh. It definitely presents its challenges, in particular when you are trying to finalize the offer for a very talented candidate that you want to appoint into a role. And while there are procedures and sort of recruitment supplement processes that organizations can apply to roles, it's not agile enough for managers to be able to make that informed decision when they have a candidate right in front of them and they just want to secure the deal per se. So it's definitely something that we need to be looking into as a public sector organisation. And I think there's a lot of work that could be done around how we position ourselves as an organisation in what is a very tight, competitive labour market. NRW, one example, we have a number of fantastic benefits that no other public sector organisation offers. Flexible and hybrid working is just one key example when compared to other civil service departments where they have a key criteria that they have to be office based for a certain percentage of the week. So when you look at the actual talent landscape, for me, the organizations generally need to understand how they can be be best placed to enable their managers to make the right decisions in the right time. Because if you have talent gaps or resourcing gaps in your organization, it has a knock-on effect for other teams and for the organization to achieve its objectives, its aims, and its goals.
There are so many challenges facing each different sector, each industry. Can you touch a little bit upon, we briefly spoke about today is making the public sector available to diverse audiences. What does that mean to you? How are you trying to achieve that through NRW?
Really great question. So for me, diverse means, in very simple, simplistic terms, is everyone and everything, and every candidates will have their own individual needs, etc. Um, I think it comes down to the basics. Number one is your sort of foundations. You really do need to have a clear job description. A candidate, after reading a job description, should be able to understand what the role is, what they would be required to do in the role, and what criteria do they need to meet as a minimum in order to be interviewed for the role. What I see generally within the public sector is we overcomplicate those basic elements. We tend to not be concise in our job descriptions. We tend to impose quite a convoluted application process, which is off-putting for any candidate, full stop. And we don't put ourselves in the candidate's shoes generally, to think of the time investment that they put into an application, and also what are we getting out from that? If ultimately we are going to be interviewing them and testing those criterias, competency, skills, whatever elements you are assessing on, surely we could look at changing the application process to be a little bit more lighter touch or generally more accessible. So candidates at all different levels from all different communities could consider working for you as an organization. I think representation is becoming an area or a topic that absolutely needs addressing as well. Um, Public sector generally don't tend to promote the people who work within the organization. So if for me as a candidate, when I was looking to join NRW, it was really hard to sort of find who was doing what in the organization, or to read, for example, like a candidate, an employee testimonial to get their experience of what it's like to work in the organization and what they enjoy about their role and what do they love about the organization in terms of culture, in terms of working environment. So there's a lot of basic key areas that public sector generally don't develop nor push, but I think would really benefit them when it comes to attracting from a broad audience talent pool.
Joe, it sounds fascinating how you're trying to, about your perspective on it. Can you give me specific examples about how the public sector can make those changes, or maybe what you're doing at NRW yourself?
So what we have done in NRW is we have revisited our job adverts. To give you a key example, when I applied for the role that I'm in now, and when I first stepped into the organisation, we were using job titles that weren't sort of industry standard. So that was the first thing that we did, was that we adopted more industry standard job titles, which would not only help us from a search perspective and help us get better visibility on job boards, and also help us when it came to candidate targeting. It just gave clarity to, the potential applicant. This is what we're looking for: a application developer, for example, rather than a lead specialist advisor in application support development systems, which is a mouthful in itself. The second element of the change was completely overhauling our job description advert template. Our job description adverts had two components to it for advertising purposes. We had what was called a job summary, and then we had what was called then the role description. Normally, we would get the candidate to read the job summary to get the broader information around the role and the general package supported with it. And then the key criteria, job accountabilities and qualifications and experience, etc., would be located in the role description. So we trialed it within the organization for a particular role that was proven to be a little bit difficult to recruit into. So we adopted what is now our standard advert template. We stripped it right back. So we had it consisted of 4 sections. The first section was the role. So just a brief paragraph on what the role is about. The second section then was introducing the team and where the role sits within the organisation and against its organisational objectives and priorities. The third section then was to provide, either in list format or in paragraphs, whatever the manager preferred, was a summary on what the role, what we would require the candidate to undertake in the role on a day-to-day basis. And then the final section then was the key job criteria, the qualifications and accountability. So again, in list format, we would be telling the candidate what they need to be demonstrating or proving with evidence in the job application. We also simplified the job application process as well. So we were previously using a competency structure framework, which is pretty standard within the civil service generally. So it tests candidates' sort of behaviours towards key themes. And what we were seeing generally from our data was, while we were able to attract interest to the roles and drive traffic to our web pages, we were seeing a number of candidates falling off from that particular point because they could probably see the work involved with our application and thought that maybe isn't for them. So we adopted what I like to call a flexible application process. We ask for a CV as part of our application form, and we also ask for a personal statement, which is similar to what somebody would write as a covering letter. And what we found in our trial was that we were able to increase the number of applications, which many would argue, some would argue is good, some would argue is bad, but generally we increased the number of applications, which then resulted in us being able to secure quality hires as part of that process. And then in conversation then with various employee network groups, our trade union partnership forum, and also a senior leadership team, we made the decision to adopt it organisation-wide to help us with all roles within the organisation.
Oh yeah, no, it sounds incredible. That journey taking you through there. And is that how you see the industry moving in the next 3 to 4 years? If you're looking at if you're looking at the public sector, what does that landscape look like kind of moving forwards?
I think the landscape is tough is going to be tough for the next couple of years for all public sector organisations. I from what I'm reading in external sources, funding is going to be a key issue for many organisations. And as organisations generally experience, they are going to be asked to be delivering more, but not necessarily with the additional funding behind it. So that's going to have serious implications to, our listeners who are people management practitioners, or our listeners who work within the talent and acquisition sort of arena. And how we combat that is going to be challenging for everyone involved. Relating back to the previous example that I gave you, I think it's really important that we have tangible products in terms of our roles that we are selling to the external audience. It's really important that candidates understand what the role is, what it involves, and what they need to have in terms of experience, qualifications, and knowledge to be able to apply. And I think if we just adopt those key basic practices, that's going to help us some way along the way.
It sounds like you're envisaging quite a rocky road in general. I think it is kind of the impression that I'm getting. But if you to look at yourself, kind of the journey that you've had from starting off with student recruitment to where you are today, would you, with hindsight, I ask this everyone, with hindsight, would you do it again?
I find this such a fascinating question. I probably would do it again, and hopefully with a wiser hat on. But something I do tell a number of my friends is that if I had my time again in terms of choosing what I was studying or choosing what I did, I think I probably would have still stuck with studying modern foreign languages at university, but I probably would have added a social sciences in that mix to keep it balanced. That generally would have been the one change I would make. In terms of my career choices, I definitely wouldn't be making any changes in that particular area. I think I've been very fortunate to have such a variety on my CV and in my career history. And while they may, to some listeners, sound very odd sort of movements from one era to the other, I think they all carry some key similarities in terms of having the skills to be able to position products to the audience that you're trying to communicate and trying to attract. Really trying to understand what is your product as well and trying to make it saleable. I think those are key skills that carry throughout all the roles that I've been very lucky to be in over the last 10 years.
Well, I'd agree with you. I think there's a huge amount of synergy from us as a business. We have worked with student recruitment and both hands traction, so I can see the similarity straight away, and we probably share similar paths in that extent. And then just to finish us off, what nugget would you share? So what nugget of advice would you share with your younger self starting out in this journey? You said you'd maybe go from a university perspective, change a module here or there, or slight position of education. But what would you, from a career perspective, what would you share with yourself?
From a career perspective, talking to my younger self, I would say try not to focus too much on what you think you want to do when you are older. I would advise to do what you enjoy the most. So if you enjoy one subject over another, great, pursue that. Get as much out of it, develop the skills that you need with it. And remember, if you decide to go to university, or if you decide to do a course in college, or if you decide to go down the apprenticeship route, there's a wealth of external sources out there to help. And I think this sort of leads me on to a point that I think is really important. I think there's a noticeable shift now with the generation that are now entering higher education. I think they do think more about the careers that they want after graduating, and that is great. I wish I had that mentality when I was at university. I think universities have a responsibility as well to ensure that they have the advice support services available to students to access, so they can understand that they don't necessarily have to be pigeonholed into roles that necessarily relate to their degree, but that they're probably developing a whole wealth of different skills that will make so many career opportunities accessible for them. And I think those services have a responsibility in signposting and showing those opportunities to individuals. Um, yeah, so reflecting back on my younger self, I would say do what you enjoy the most. It's really important that you get the most out of it as well. And there will always be opportunities wherever you end up going and whatever you end up doing. It'll always lead to something positive and meaningful.
I wholeheartedly agree. Well, Joe, thank you so much. That was honest. It was thoughtful, pragmatic, reflective. Really, really interesting to hear you talk about your journey today, what you're doing with NRW, and your wider, I think, perspective of the market as a whole. Very, very honest. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. To anyone who's listening, as always, please like, subscribe. You can find us on all available audio streaming channels: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Joe, thank you so much for joining me. A special shout out to your dogs as well, who may make a bit of a feature in the background when the postman turned up.
They definitely did. So apologies for that. And thank you for having me as well. It's been an absolute pleasure being with you today.
Great. No, thanks so much for joining. Everyone, please like and subscribe. Thank you very much for listening to another episode of Talent Talks.